To solve polynomial equations by factoring, we use the zero product property. The following is true for all real numbers a and b. If a times b is 0, then a is 0, or b is 0. This leads to the following strategy for solving polynomial equations. Rewrite the equation in the form px is equal to 0, so move all terms to one side to get a 0 on the other side. Factor the polynomial p of x, and set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Let's illustrate this with the examples on page 62. Solve the following equations. Question 1. X squared minus 4x is 12. We use the basic strategy. So we rewrite to get a 0 on one side. We get x squared minus 4x minus 12 is 0. Next we factor this polynomial. We are looking for two numbers s and t whose sum is negative 4 and whose product is negative 12. We see that s is negative 6 and t is equal to 2 will work. Negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4, and negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. So we can immediately factor as x minus 6 times x plus 2. Now we set each factor equal to 0. X minus 6 is 0, or x plus 2 is 0. We solve these new equations, and we find x is 6, or x is equal to negative 2. So we get two solutions, x is negative 2, or x is 6. Question 2. 7x squared is equal to 5x. Do not divide both sides by x, since we do not know if x is not equal to 0. It turns out that we miss a solution if we divide by x. Instead, we use the basic strategy and factor. We need to rewrite this equation to get a 0 on one side. Next we factor. Here we can factor out the greatest common factor. We have the terms 7x squared and 5x. The greatest common factor is x. When we factor out x, we are left with 7x minus 5. Now we set each factor equal to 0. We get x is 0, or 7x minus 5 is 0. And we solve these new equations. The first equation, x is 0, is already solved. For the second equation, we move the 5 to the right side and then divide both sides by 7. So we find two solutions, x is 0, or x is 5 over 7. Question 3. X squared is 25. We could solve this equation by taking the square root of both sides. However, 25 has two square roots. So it is very important that we write plus or minus when taking the square root of both sides. X is plus or minus the square root of 25, which simplifies to plus or minus 5. We do not have this problem if we decide to factor the equation instead. X squared is 25. We have to rewrite to get a 0 on one side. We get x squared minus 25 is 0. Now we factor. We can use the difference of squares since 25 is 5 squared. So we can factor this as x minus 5 times x plus 5. Now we set each factor equal to 0. We find x minus 5 is 0, or x plus 5 is 0, and solve these new equations. We find two solutions, x is negative 5, or x is 5. Question 4. X times 5x plus 7 is equal to 6. We use the basic strategy. we have to rewrite the equation to get a 0 on one side. Next, we distribute and find 5x squared plus 7x minus 6 is 0. Now we factor this. This is the AC method, so we are looking for two numbers whose sum is 7 and whose product is 5 times negative 6, which is negative 30. We see that 10 and negative 3 work. 10 plus negative 3 is 7, and 10 times negative 3 is negative 30. So we split the term 7x and rewrite it as 10x minus 3x. Now we continue factoring by grouping, so we split this into two groups. Since our third term starts with a negative sign, we factor out a negative sign out of the second group. Now we factor out the greatest common factor out of each group. For the first group, we have the terms 5x squared and 10x. The greatest common factor is 5x. When we factor out 5x, we are left with x plus 2. For the second group, we have 3x and 6. The greatest common factor is 3. When we factor out 3, we are left with x plus 2. Now we factor out the common binomial x plus 2 and are left with 5x minus 3. We set each factor equal to 0. We get x plus 2 is 0 or 5x minus 3 is 0. Now we solve these new equations. We get x is negative 2 or 5x is 3. Dividing that second equation by 5, we get x is negative 2 or x is 3 over 5. So again, we find two solutions. Question 5. X cubed minus 4x squared minus 9x plus 36 is 0. We use the basic strategy and try to factor. The only method that can work here is factor by grouping, since we have a 4-term polynomial. So we split into two groups. Since our third term starts with a negative sign, we factor out a negative sign out of the second group. Next, we factor out the greatest common factor of each group. For the first group, we have the terms x cubed and 4x squared. The greatest common factor is x squared. When we factor out x squared, we are left with x squared x minus 4. For the second group, we have the terms 9x and 36. The greatest common factor is 9. When we factor out 9, we are left with x minus 4. Now we factor out the common binomial x minus 4 and are left with x squared minus 9. We have to continue factoring, and here we can use the difference of squares method, since 9 is 3 squared, so we can factor x squared minus 9 as x minus 3 times x plus 3. Now we set each factor equal to 0 and get x minus 4 is 0, or x minus 3 is 0, or x plus 3 is 0. We solve these new equations and we find x is 4, or x is 3, or x is negative 3. And hence we have three solutions: x is negative 3, or x is 3, or x is 4.